All righty. So I'm doing the introductions today. My name's Lisa Walker. I'm with Hyattsville Aging in Place and with Neighbors Helping Neighbors College Park Exploration on Aging College Park, Helping Hands University Park, and now the Gateway Village. We actually started corridor conversations during COVID to give us a way to connect with older members of our community while we were not leaving the house. So we've been running these programs for quite a while, and you can see the archive on our website and on our YouTube channel. And we will be recording this one. I'm really excited about this program today. I've been interested in tiny homes and ADUs since we started with the city of Hyattsville, the age-friendly plan, looking at housing and the issues of affordable housing in the city of Hyattsville. At that time, obviously, and still now, they were illegal in Prince George's County, but the state of Maryland has passed enabling legislation requiring every county to come up with regulation. So we're going to talk about all of that today. And I'm really excited about the speakers that we have because they are really on the forefront of this development. Robert Thurston and Devina Pacheco, who developed the ADU section of College Park's really great affordable housing task force report, are two of the speakers, and Eric Saul of Saul Architects, who has actually attempted to create his own ADU before they were legal in Montgomery County, and has now, since they have been legal, has built a number of them, and we'll be talking about them. Let me just say that Robert has a background in leadership in the transportation industry. He's very active in College Park on aging, on housing, on restorative justice and transportation issues. And he moved to College Park, in fact, to provide housing under the same roof for his aging parents. Devina's background includes 25 years in government, including 10 years in the Air Force, and focused on international cooperation and negotiation. She moved here from California, where she was familiar with tiny homes and ADUs because California has had them for a while. So I am really excited to turn this over to Robert and to Devina just to kick off this discussion. Take it away.
Great, thank you. Again, thank you all for being here. I do not profess to be an expert, but I have kind of immersed myself in the ADU concept since working on the task force, and would like to just present a few of the findings that we have had. I'm going to start with the information that has come from the state task force and also the county task force and where they seem to be heading. And then I'll turn it over to Devina. They'll give you some further information and examples of what seems to be a reason why that ADUs are prevalent. And then we'll turn it over to what is becoming the subject matter expert in Eric and how he has transitioned to it being a real thing for him, as well as his work in Montgomery County. So I just want to, it's somewhat been stated already that the ADU concept in the state of Maryland is really coming out of the concept of affordability and housing in the state. And go to the next slide, Davina. The task force finished their work in May of 2024 with the request and I guess somewhat instructions for counties and municipalities to develop a plan for and legislation for ADUs by October of this year. So it is coming. But just to give you an example, the state of Maryland's of affordable housing really was the task force really came out of the affordable housing departments from Housing and Community Development to Department of Health and the Department of Disabilities, all really were supportive in this effort and trying to get it established in the state. The HB 1466 was the impetus to get everything moving for municipalities. ADU in and of itself is really a smaller independent dwelling, which is subordinate to the primary house. Current legislation is expecting this to be where single family zoning is allowed and required. An ADU has to include cooking, living, sanitation, and sleeping facilities. It should be, these are the state guidelines, should be no more than 75% of the primary single dwelling. And an ADU must meet local building, fire, and safety codes. The by right of approval requiring one ADU in areas in Maryland does not mean that I can just go to my backyard and start working on that picture that I have behind me, but it is intended to kind of ease the way into being allowed. And when you go through the process, that it is an expectation that it is something that is allowed. I would say similarly to what we currently have now in being able to build a shed in our backyard. You still have to have permitting and meet the certain requirements to do so, but it is something that is an expectation that a single family homeowner could do. There is an expectation or an understanding that parking will be something that has to be worked out, but I would say that part of the guidelines from the state is that if there are restrictive parking requirements, that the municipality has to do a formalized parking study before they can impose any type of restrictions in that area. Lot requirements is something that is, all of these are kind of guidelines because they wanted to leave some flexibilities for the different municipalities and county regs to allow them to meet their current rules and regulations, but there would be lot requirements that is expected, whether that is the setbacks. But in all of these, one of the overriding expectations is that these things will be done in a manner that do not present unreasonable barriers to ADU development. The restrictive covenants really go to similarly to what I've said about the different lot requirements, but also that there is certain things that are within different municipality codes that may be otherwise restrictive that they're expecting to be looked at to ensure that it does not, again, impede the process of being able to develop an ADU. And I just want to preface again, both the state and the county's expectation or desires with this is to address the affordability crisis that we are facing truly around the country. Next slide, please. I wanted to give you just a snapshot of what the makeup of the county task force looks like. They were established, I believe, in October of 2025, had their first meeting in November, and I think since have had 3 formalized meetings. However, one of the first things that they did was to create subcommittees to dig in and address these different areas of concerns. The subgroups are zoning and land use, building codes and standards, community and public outreach. As you can see, the task force is headed by a county councilman, and the participants in this are not only those that may have knowledge to housing, but are also the administrator and in many cases the writers of the legislation that would eventually create the legislation that is and rules and regulations for ADUs. There is some representation from residents in the county. I think most of our districts, I mean, may not be immediately represented here, but there is a residential component to this. Some real life experiences of people that, in some cases, the have some ADUs in their neighborhoods that aren't necessarily legal at this point, but they are there. So, and again, their job and expectation is that they will provide advice on housing policy and implementation, advocate for modified housing and development tools, educate residents about housing needs and affecting residents and actions to address them, and strive to provide equal access to high quality residences for all of Prince George's counties, regardless of race, gender, address disability status, social economic status, and language. So that is their charge in doing so. And there is an actual meeting that's coming up. I believe they will meet again on Monday, the full body for, I believe it's going to be the fourth time. Well, after my piece, I'll try to put in the link for anyone that would like to can sign in. But they're going to be discussing, what the benefits of Prince George's County residents are, key benefits to the county, and discuss case studies of ADUs working well, and also the ADU challenges that are that they perceive at this particular point. Next slide. So current ADU recommendations include that there is a current, and Eric probably knows this piece better than I do, but there's an international code of building that the group is recommending becomes a part of the ADU concept as well, and hoping that the county council will adopt that. Also, there's recommendations, and I put this as a sprinkler requirement, but basically any existing safety and security measures that are in the main house would be expected in the subordinate unit. But conversely, if they're not, if they were built before, for example, the sprinkler system was a requirement, then it would also not be required for the subordinate unit or ADU as well. I'm going to speak for College Park residents. I know one of the concerns is that it would become another college rental house, but there is a current recommendation that the bedroom limit be 2, so it won't be massive and allow for an exorbitant amount of residents in the house. And I would also say that would also be a consideration and an attribute in the parking restrictions, because if there's 2 bedrooms, then there shouldn't be 10 cars out front in that for a new ADU. The housing types is to allow modular tiny houses and manufactured homes to be part of the allowed ADUs, but of course they're going to come with certain caveats. For instance, I believe whatever structure it is, it has to be affixed to the ground. So, it probably wouldn't be a mobile home, but if a mobile home can be affixed to the structure, then that's something that may be a consideration. Again, the approval process for the county would also be by right, without the need for exception of approval, but you would still have to meet the requirements of curtain building and use of the counties. streamlining the permitting process. And for those of you that have had anything done in the county, you know, that would be a welcome opportunity. And hopefully if they figure that out for ADUs, maybe they can do it for fences and all the other things that seems to take forever. Uh, they're looking to recommend tax exemptions and abatements for ADU affordability rentals and also senior housing. And also the overall housing goals is to target affordable housing, aging in place, transit-oriented housing, and multi-generational housing uses. Next slide, please. The other subgroup that is currently functioning right now, and I would also say that a lot of the meat and potatoes of the requirements will fall under the land use and zoning. Some of the recommendations that I mentioned in the previous slide are really at this time somewhat recommendations to this subcommittee that they become a part of the legislation. But the considerations of the housing design versus ADUs, and just one example I wanted to point out there is there are some existing homes right now that have a built-out basement that includes kitchen and also bath and living area. So just clarifying if that is an ADU or what makes it an ADU or not an ADU, because if you happen to have that type of build out, does that mean that you cannot have an ADU in the backyard? So there'll be some specification on to try to determine that. The setbacks, as you know, all know, may know, but when you build a house, it has to be a certain distance from the street and certain spacing from the side of the houses. So how does the setback requirements fit in to that on a property line, and what would be the actual setbacks specifically for an ADU? Another thing that is, I think, would be of importance to many of us on the call is that there is a property owner requirement to live on the property. That can either be in the main dwelling or the ADU. You know, some of us may be just thinking about having a granny flat, as they call it, for us in the backyard, and having our older family living in the main house, or maybe even renting it out. But whatever the case is, there would be a requirement for the property owner to live on the house. Those are things that will become standards, but right now they're in. The reason why I have them listed as considerations because they haven't yet made determining language on how that will be. Where they have in when I talk about standards. So an attached ADU, the maximum size would be 850 square feet. So that would be, again, the basement, building out the attic for a separate unit. That would be an 850 square foot max. For a detached ADU, again, maximum of 75% of the principal structure, or 12,000 square feet, whichever one is less with no minimum. The height, which is listed as a standard, but after the last meeting, I think they're looking at that of a maximum height of 22 feet. And I think many of us may have cringed with the thought of ADUs coming and seeing the news clip of the home in Fairfax that is blocking out the sun because they went up so high in their structure. So that's something that's being looked at. But one of the things that seems to be coming through is that the current makeup of the communities and housing structures should somehow fit into what would be allowable. They haven't quite come up with the verbiage on that, but that's something they're looking at in that case. Again, density would be 1 ADU per lot. A parking study would be required if parking requirements are imposed. The ADU types are basically 3 types of structures. the detached, which means it's, separate from the principal unit, a conversion such as an attic or a basement, or an attached structure that connects to the main single family home, but is not part of it. So those are the three different types of ADUs that they're classifying. Again, ADU must include a kitchen, living space, and a bathroom to be classified as an ADU. And that is where they currently stand with the county and state recommendations. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to my partner, Devina, to talk about why bring ADUs to our area, and specifically College Park.
Thank you, Robert. This is Devina Pacheco. Thank you for having me. But why College Park should allow more ADUs? So there's some 10 benefits here for accessory dwelling units for affordability, like Robert mentioned, sustainability, family flexibility, and smart growth. And so the benefit category, we're going to talk about affordability and supply. It eases housing pressures for students, staff, and families. The infrastructure efficacy uses transit and infrastructure already in place, which is wonderful. We don't have to create that from scratch. Multi-generational support helps families stay close as they age in place. Financial flexibility, rental income can improve household stability, passive income. Property value boost improves marketability and local tax base as well. It supports compact, lower impact living. The neighborhood character adds density without major physical changes. As we see some of the new buildings that are being built, they're causing major physical changes to our College Park area. So this wouldn't cause that. Flexible use adapts to work creative and guests as needed for long-term or short-term stays. Easier permitting. Smaller units can be simpler to approve. And I think Eric will talk more about zoning and permits and so forth on what you're trying to build. And alignment with city goals supports smart university-centered growth, which is really important. And next, we would talk about more about College Park ADU's policy examples and zoning reform reform ideas. Real world change town examples tailored to blueprint for discussions. And so like Lisa mentioned, I moved here from San Diego, California 2 years ago, and I saw what a great model and what a great improvement it was for our community in San Diego, for the college students there, the university, and also for the families to stay together and for affordability as well. And so I thought it was very successful. It was something new when it started. San Diego was one of the leading folks in ADUs, but they put a lot of policies in place before it started. And as they were going, they learned, and we had to revise those policies and set it up for success. And so that's something that we can talk about a little bit here more about. So College Park zoning reform and blueprint summary. And so Robert mentioned by right permitting, allow 1 ADU per lot via streamlined administrative approval. The parking occupancy, eliminate parking minimums and drop owner occupancy rules. Law and design standards, relax setbacks and set size caps such as 800 square feet. Fees and utilities, waive permit and connection fees, and simplify utility setup as well. Technical assistance, offer design guides and templates and help desk support to support the community, what they want to build, what's best designed for their specific home. Multiple units, consider allowing attached plus detached ADUs on the same lot as well. Again, the affordability I mentioned before, and the state coordination, I know that's happening as we speak, like Robert mentioned, aligning with Maryland ADU Task Force recommendations is imperative for our community. In campus, proximate ADUs encourage the students-oriented ADUs near the University of Maryland, and adapting the governance, monitor the results and learn from that, and kind of just revise those policies as this new program gets into place. And as everything that's new, people are resistant because of change or it's new. So here's some counter arguments of like why the objections could be about it's too much traffic. Well, the counter argument is that ADU residents often own fewer cars in permit zones, and they can manage the spillover. Neighborhood character, that it changes it drastically. The design standards can keep units in scale with surrounding homes. The infrastructure strain, growth is gradual and added revenue can support the upgrades versus when you're building a brand new building, it's not gradual, it's all of a sudden. So this is different. A countermeasure is important to understand that. The property value loss, ADUs often increase the value through added space and rental flexibility. And people are like, oh, we're going to have all these student parties. It's going to be crazy. But the nuance rules and stable tenant incentives can reduce those risks if we get ahead of that as a team, all the task forces. Higher housing costs, smaller homes typically rent for less, and incentives can improve the affordability for our community. Construction disruption, projects are smaller and faster than full home constructions, and our next presenter can talk more about that. But I know in California, we saw a lot of ADUs coming up together and did not cause a lot of disruptions to the communities. I lived that firsthand experience, so I can share that. On short-term rentals, separate rules and minimum lease terms can prioritize residents' housing. School crowding, most ADU households are not families with school-aged children. They are, but it's not the majority of it from the examples that I'll talk to you soon and from my experience as well. And the poor maintenance, since no big objection, but inspections and registration and hiring inspectors to support this with talking to your district that we want this to happen, the demand signal can allow them to expand personnel to support the increase of like inspections and registrations to allow the owner to have these incentives to support the upkeep. And some examples here of other college examples that have done it and has been successful. The first one is the Arn Harbor in Michigan. They were able to get the ADUs liberalized in 2021, allowing upwards to 22,000 more homes to potentially add ADUs. And the city had some relaxed regulations around the home-based businesses, and it helped with aiding walkability and small-scale urban density for them. Gainesville, Florida, the city allowed up to 2 ADUs per lot, cap size 800 square feet, and notably removed both parking and owner occupancy requirements. It also eliminated subjective design standards and permitted ADUs by right in all residence zones, and no special use and permits needed. They were a little more flexible, and it actually was a very successful model as well. Raleigh, North Carolina, in 2021, they stood up their program, and their zoning reform was enabled by the right construction of ADUs, duplexes, and triplexes. And they spurred an approval to review over 2,800 new dwelling homes that previously wouldn't have been allowed. And it really helped with the community there for students and the aging community as well. And actually, I was just there like 2 weeks ago, so I saw it firsthand. And Boulder, Colorado, Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, mostly of the West Coast, they've been initiating ADUs for quite some time. So a lot of lessons learned and avoid dual efforts is, while not overwhelmingly college towns, these cities provide strong templates like Seattle and Portland, passed progressive zoning laws and offered financial incentives that encourage ADUs near the university. And I know that's something that Robert just mentioned to you that could be some incentives our community is looking into as well. In Boulder, also, they focus on being more eco-friendly, energy efficient ADUs, something for College Park for our aging community. And also we have a lot of veterans and disabled veterans that ADA compliance would be something to look into to support that community, marginalized community as well. And lastly, Berkeley, California, homeowners frequently convert their garages and yards into ADUs, helping ease student housing pressure and optimize existing spaces. And finally, you can design your retirement living with family and or your community with ADUs. So this is a picture in the Netherlands. There's a nursing home that lets college students live rent-free if they agree to spend 30 hours a month hanging out with their elderly residents. This is just an example of models that have been successful in other countries and in other places in the US as well. But retirement homes in the Netherlands, Humanitas, they share meals, conversations, small daily tasks, or just sitting and talking to the residents. And the students they're not caregivers or staff, but they're just neighbors. And there's a lot of benefits to the students and to the elderly. And that could be something that could be looked into. We want to do that here in College Park for the Spillman House or the Attic Towers. There's also not just students, but we also have a lot of traveling nurses that come through our area because other hospitals near us, or traveling radiologists, and they're always looking for long-term or short-term rentals. So these are other groups for you to look at as well. So you could create this in any way that you want. And Hopefully, we're around for more questions and more interest. And if we don't have the answers of what you're looking for, we can definitely look into that as well. I would like to pass over to our next presenter, or I don't know if we have time for questions. I think we have a few minutes for questions. So that concludes this, and our next speaker will be Eric Saul, who'll talk about more about Montgomery County. But any questions for Robert and I before I pass it to our next presenter? Thank you.
There are a few questions that are sort of College Park focused, or Prince George's focused. So maybe we can hit a few of those, and then there's some others that look like maybe after Eric speaks would be better to address. There was one, has College Park City Council agreed with or accepted the task force recommendations yet?
Yeah. Go ahead, Devina.
No, go, Robert, and then if you need me, I'll jump in.
I was going to say, yes, they have accepted the document, the task force report, but have said that they have a lot of work yet to do for themselves, and they were going to have further work sessions to see what next steps there are.
Okay. And there was one from Danny Shipley. Is Prince George's or any other local zoning and land use jurisdiction considering waivers, perhaps grandfathering in a basement ceilings as they relate to ADU build-outs? He noted many existing basements provide enough headroom for habitation, but less than 7-foot typical code requirement.
I can answer. I don't know that answer, but I'm writing it down so we can get an answer for your community. So if it's in the chat, I'll copy it, but I don't have the answer. Robert, do you? I don't.
No, I mean, the only thing I can say is that, at this point right now, they do plan to use existing home standards to incorporate ADUs, but it has not been specifically discussed.
All right.
We've had that issue in Montgomery County, and the existing building code, the EIBC, has a 6'8" head clearance for an existing basement. If you build a new basement, it has to meet 7 feet, but we at least allow 6'8", which is still pretty short, but doors have to be 6'8", so they just kind of made everything 6'8".
Okay. And the 75% of primary house space that's mentioned in your presentation, Robert, does that mean no more than 75% of the footprint or the square footage of a single level or of an entire home structure?
I believe it's the footprint of I guess would be the main floor. It's not the entire home, but just the footprint of the home.
Okay. All right. Now, are there any concerns that if College Park drops the owner occupancy or parking requirements, that it's just going to become more student housing in disguise? I know you mentioned that in passing, Devina.
Yes, and definitely that's something that putting like nuisance rules and making sure like there are regulations that they can follow, that doesn't happen, because I know that's happened before. There's a concern of like college kids having too much fun, but we can definitely get ahead of that. I know San Diego did, and so did Raleigh, North Carolina, and they were able to avoid that because you can let the owner know, hey, if this happens more than 3 times, then you have to remove, we can put restrictions to support that and avoid that. And I've seen that happen as well.
Okay, I know there are a few other. Oh, I'm sorry, Robert, were you?
No.
Okay. I know there are a few other questions we haven't gotten to, but let's go ahead and hear from Eric, and then we can see what other new questions pop up and cycle back to ones that maybe still need to be addressed.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us on a Saturday. I know there's more fun things to do than sit on a Zoom call, but here we are. My name is Eric Saul. Let me share my screen here. There we go. I have a lot of experience here in Montgomery County. Our ADU bill passed 6 years ago at the beginning of 2020. We're hoping for better stats, but COVID obviously happened right like 3 months or less after we passed this bill. So we kind of stumbled out of the gate in terms of trying to see like how quickly we could build more of these ADUs. It took a couple years of getting through like having people who weren't part of your family living on your property, fear of COVID, things like that. So the real stats kind of started 2022, 2023, and we started seeing about 150 of these countywide per year, which, isn't a whole lot, but it is getting better. We also saw massive inflation, right? So the cost of building went way up. So we had kind of a double whammy with COVID and inflation and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully things will settle down in the future. We'll get things under control. I think we're building more of these. I'm getting more phone calls about them. So we should start seeing more ADUs being built soon. But that being said, let me just talk a little bit about myself. I'm a residential architect in Tacoma Park. I'm right on the border, probably 100 yards away from Prince George's County. I've designed many ADUs in DC. They've been allowing them for a long time, basement apartments or rear of the building, like a garage conversion into an apartment. Um, I tried to build one for myself here in Tacoma Park, 10 years ago, before I even looked into the laws here. And I was shocked to realize I could not build a detached ADU. I could only build an attached one. And we have weird rules that if someone within 300 feet of you had an ADU, you could not build one. So literally like one out of every maybe 8 houses or something could have one. And the next door neighbor to me had a basement apartment already. So I thought that was kind of weird how my neighbor could build one, but I couldn't. That just seemed weird. And the only way to change that would be the neighbor either not having a basement apartment or moving, and then I could swoop in and get my license while he's out because it has to be owner occupied. You can't just sell the house and then pass that ADU to the next person. They would have to reapply for it. So anyway, all this I felt was a little bit confusing and unfair. So I started talking to Montgomery County officials, and we are already working through a housing crisis. So they agreed. Montgomery County passed new laws 6 years ago, and luckily I designed the very first one. I had one ready to go for a friend of mine, and I said, it's going to pass. Let's just wait till January 1st, 2020, and let's do it. So we did. I also designed the first tiny house ADU, which a tiny house is simply under 400 square feet. So we did one of those with a tiny garage and made it 2 stories. I'll show you pictures of those. We've talked about what is an ADU. I don't really need to go too much into it. A lot of people confuse ADU with affordable dwelling units. I've had people say that to me, and it's not. It is more affordable, and we'll talk about why, but it's an accessory dwelling unit. You can make these as expensive as you want. It's your own property. It's your own house. You can make it really luxury, right? It doesn't have to be affordable. So that's a confusion that people have had. And it's really just a secondary smaller house on your lot. All the rules that we've created in Montgomery County make the footprint smaller, the height smaller, everything's about 50% smaller. So it doesn't look like a duplex, or it doesn't look like you have 2 houses on one lot. They really want that second building to be smaller and less important, basically. And it must have a kitchen, bathroom, and sleeping space. And part of that kitchen rule is it's got to be a real kitchen. You can't put like a dorm fridge under the counter. We require a full-size fridge. It can be 30 inches or 27 inches. They have like narrower ones, but it has to be, a 5 foot tall fridge. You have to have, an oven, like a range that's you can actually fit something into. It can't just be a hot plate, or a microwave. They want this thing to be a real unit that multiple people can rent. Bathroom can't be something like a stall like you see when you go camping and you rent an RV in those tiny little bathrooms. It has to be a real bathroom with standards that meet regular bathroom standards for a house. So that's pretty much what an ADU is. Types of ADUs, obviously attached, could be a basement apartment or addition. Those, like I said, were legal in Montgomery County, but they had restrictions. The detached one is really the new one. And the most popular is probably the garage conversion. As you know, most people don't even use their garage. It's just storage. They're just shoving their junk in there, and their cars are parked in the driveway. So we've been doing mostly garage conversions in Montgomery County. And here are just a couple of footprint examples of like what an ADU looks like from the floor plan perspective. So, on the left, you have a one bedroom model. On the right, you have a two bedroom model. These are basically the bread and butter sizes we have been building here. As you can see, the kitchen, it's a full kitchen. It's got dishwasher, sink, range, fridge, all normal size. Not really a formal dining room, just kitchen table kind of thing. We put washer and dryer units in all of them. There's a water heater that goes in. You have mechanical units and everything. The bathroom, as you can see, is a normal size bathroom. Um, it's not, a weird tiny stall that you can barely fit in. So yeah, these are our two kind of main models we've been doing. And these are just some photos of ones we've done. So, and everyone has a story. So, we're going to go through a couple slides and I'll tell you the story of like why it was built and the purpose it serves. So you can see Joan in the left picture in the lower left corner. She owns the main house and it's just her and she has a four-bedroom house. She wanted to rent. She built this ADU to live in, and now she rents out the main house to a family instead of the opposite, where she's kind of used. She felt kind of guilty renting, owning four bedrooms and not using them all. So she built this little tiny house ADU for herself. So that's an option that people are doing. Um, and this one here it looks big. The first level with the orange doors, that's just storage. We're on a hill, so we had some room to build underneath it. It's really just two floors above. Super modern, super cool. It's in Bethesda, just got finished. The story of this was two friends lived together in the same house. So the friend was living in the basement of the main house, and there's kids and dogs and other family members. The friend was nice enough to let her friend build her ADU on her property. And so they're still roommates, just in two separate buildings. So what a great friend to let you build on their land. So that was a really unique thing here. This one is in Tacoma Park. It's an elderly father. He's in late 80s. He didn't want to like go live in a high-rise building. There are here in Montgomery County for a lot of senior living places. He wanted to stay in Tacoma Park and be near his family. So now he can be in his backyard. We built a handicap ramp on the side here to go from the main house up to it. It's got a nice little deck, kind of a woodsy character of the neighborhood in this part. So he gets to stay in the area he loves. This was a garage that wasn't really being used. This owner just felt, hey, we should build more housing in the neighborhood. So he built this to provide a house for I think a college student lives there now. And it's got, I don't really have the floor plan of this, but you can see the stairs are really narrow and steep. The tiny house allows those things to happen. You can build like a really steep kind of ladder stair with a little loft space up there. So not really designed for aging in place, but for a college kid, it's great. This one is still under construction. This is an example of attaching the ADU to that main house. And so we put like a little mudroom with an awning over the door. So when you enter that, you can go either to the left or the right. Now the ADU does have its own entrance all the way over to the right. But this just gives you an idea that you can attach it to a house and create. There are laws and some like loopholes to the laws we'll talk about on why if you should attach it versus not attaching it. Montgomery County has created some kind of confusion on what the best option to do is, so we'll go over that. And this one's just like another version of an ADU. We did some ADA features. Now the front door doesn't have the ADA feature here, but there's another entrance somewhere else where you can enter from grade. But we do things like curbless showers that you can just roll into. There aren't grab bars on this toilet, but in the future they can be easily added to it. But it's all set up. So someone who's maybe renting it now, I think this is going to be rented to the daughter of the homeowner. They live in a very expensive neighborhood here in Tacoma Park, and the daughter is like, looking for a home and everything's so expensive. And it's like, wait, just build one of these in the backyard and you can stay in the neighborhood and afford to live where you grew up. So, and in the future, if she ever moves out, It's set up for someone of any age to be able to live in it. Why build an ADU? We talked about this. I don't have to go over everything. I think what to sum most of this up is I thought that most people, at least everybody thought that the rental income aspect of ADUs was going to be like the main reason why people built them. And actually, it ended up being for family members or aging relatives. That's probably the vast majority of the ones we do, if not almost all of them. Um, it is so expensive to buy a condo and pay those condo fees every month. You can build an ADU for less than like a fraction of the cost of the average condo here in Montgomery County, and there are no condo fees, right? And then it's just it's a way to stay in the neighborhood you probably lived in. So we have homeowners who just don't want to leave Tacoma Park. They love it, or Silver Spring, or wherever they are. They don't want to have to move to another place with new neighbors just because their house got too big for them and now they're empty nesters. So it just gives them a way to like stay. And that's really what we want to do is provide options for people. Um, it doesn't change the neighborhood really at all. They're hidden behind the main house. They have to be in the backyard. They can't be in the side yard. So they're behind the house. It's usually a garage that we convert. So it's scale wise, it doesn't really change the neighborhood. Nobody even knows they exist. They just exist among us kind of quietly. We haven't seen a massive parking problem from them because it's not like everybody on the block is building one. There might be one or two on every block. That's really what people are doing. It's not like every house is building them. So it also costs nothing to the taxpayer. You know, when let's say we build 100 ADUs, that's all coming from the homeowner. There are no subsidies with those. At least, I mean, that we provide in Montgomery County. So when you build a 100-unit development, there's a lot of requirements for, MPDUs, we call them, moderate price income units. There's subsidies, there's state subsidies. There's a lot of like taxpayer dollars that go into those types of housing units. It doesn't cost the taxpayer anything for someone to build an ADU. In fact, it brings in tax revenue because not only is there the upfront cost of construction and jobs you're creating in the small kind of world of building these things, but it's bringing in property tax revenue forever, right? So there's a value that we put on these in the assessment, and then the property tax goes up to cover that, right? So that's property taxes coming in annually. So it's really just a huge benefit to the taxpayer system and the tax system in your county to build these things. Who can build one? A developer cannot build one, basically. A lot of people are worried that developers are going to come in and just build 2 houses on every lot and then run away. And that's just not what they can do. You have to live in the home the whole time. Once you sell the house and you have an ADU, the ADU thing is basically terminated, and the next homeowner who buys the house has to reapply. So you can't transfer the ADU, you can't transfer the ownership, you just reapply. You can get it pretty easily, obviously, but no one can be moving out and then renting the two properties and trying to use it as like an Airbnb or anything like that. So we've limited kind of like that absentee investor person doing that. And then there's a permit process. It's kind of long here. It probably takes, probably 3 months to get a permit in Montgomery County. It could be a little faster. We have to do, obviously zoning reviews it for a couple weeks. Building department reviews it for a couple weeks. But then we have a DHCA license, so you have to get a rental license to do it. That takes 30 days. So we would like to speed that up. That should be something that should not take 30 days. All they do is come do an inspection to make sure you don't already have an ADU, because the rule is you can only have one. So they do a home visit, just look at your property, make sure you're not trying to build two of them, or you already have one and try to build a second one. That's all they do. And then you get your license. And then they kind of overlap zoning, and they kind of ask you about your parking and all this stuff. So we can do it a little faster. Then the construction inspections, obviously those take a while. We also have a fire sprinkler inspection for a detached unit. That can delay things up to 6 weeks. So it takes a little bit of time to get all your kind of permitting process stuff going. I recommend any county doing this to look at ways to speed that up. What does it cost? Everybody always asks this question. And these are just big ranges because obviously it depends on how nice you want it to be, how expensive, the purpose of it. We kind of build on the higher end here in Montgomery County because it's for a family member. So people are putting in granite countertops and nice, fixtures because, it's their family living there. If it's a rental property, obviously you're not going to go so high end. You might do IKEA cabinets or something, something that the maintenance could be really easy. But here's kind of the numbers we're seeing. Basement apartments anywhere from 75 to 150K. Detached ADUs, that's where it gets kind of pricey, 200 to 300K. They're expensive because you're building a real house. It's not, you can't bring in a mobile home and just set it down on the property. You have to do in-ground plumbing. You have to run electrical. You got to bring, utilities to this building underground. You have to fire sprinkler the detached ADU. That's a huge cost. Oftentimes, there's not enough water pressure for the main house, or you're just right at the level of water pressure you need, and then you're building a second house with a sprinkler system, and now you have to redo your main sewer line or your main plumbing line to the street. So WSSC has to come out and do an upgrade that costs money too. So, and then there's site work. That's a huge, whether you have to do a driveway, we'll talk about that in a second, for parking, sidewalks, vegetation, just, making it look nice around the ADU. Design engineering fees are always like 5-10% of cost. So that's roughly what it costs for architects, engineers to do that. Permit fees, 2-3K, depending on, I think Prince George's County is maybe a little bit higher than Montgomery County, but they're pretty close to each other. And then we have a rental licensing fee, whether you're renting it or not. Owning an ADU is a Class C rental license. So you pay $150 a year to maintain. Our regulations, what we did 6 years ago, are slightly different than what we talked about today, but some are very similar. So our rule is 50% of the main house. Oh, sorry. Let me start over again. It must be the smaller of these three things. So 50% of the main house footprint. So if your house is 1,000 square feet, or sorry, 1,000 square foot on the first floor. If it's multiple stories, that doesn't help you. It's the footprint, square footage. Max 10% of lot size. The typical R60 lot here, the standard is 6,000 square feet, but they kind of range up to like 10,000, and then some are massive. But usually the most lots that build ADUs are the R60 zone. So you're talking a 600 square foot, ADU up into like maybe 1,000 square feet, and then max 1,200. That we almost rarely hit number three. 1,200 square feet. That's a second house. That's really big. Number one is probably the issue that we run into the most. So especially in Tacoma Park, the houses are a little smaller here. We have these brick colonials that are everywhere, and they're like 22 by 28, which is a 600 roughly square foot footprint. So if you have to build a 300 square foot ADU, it's really small, and it's really like tough for a lot of people to do that. So you kind of get punished a little bit when you have a small house. But that one's usually the deciding factor is 50%. I like that 75% I saw on the last presentation. That helps a lot. So a 600 square foot house can build up to 450, which is probably what you need for the minimum size. And then our laws say it must be in the rear yard. We have a height limit of 20 feet, but we also have this average height too. So the midpoint of the roof at 15. So they kind of want you to create almost like an A-frame slope to your roof. So the peak can be 20, but then it kind of slopes down. So you're not really like a box at 20 feet. We have like a rule that says you can break that 15-foot midpoint, but it increases the setback 2 feet for every foot higher your average is. So you really get punished for doing like a tall ADU. You have to move it further away from the neighbors' houses. So we try to stay right at that 15-foot midpoint. We have a rear setback of 12 on an ADU, and a side setback has to match the main house. And in our 60 zone, which is typical, is 8 feet. And then I talked about this too. So if your ADU is longer than 24 feet in any direction, so let's say it's 26 by 26, you're 2 feet longer, you also have to increase your setback. So we have these sort of like limits with little punishments to keep you like from being too big against the neighbor's properties. What else? Attached ADUs. So again, max 1,200 square feet. These are would be like additions or basement apartments, right? This section. So it's 1,200 square feet. You can add a 1,200 square foot addition as long as it's touching your house. So often, like I talked about, that 600 square foot house that you can only build 300 on, those clients will just decide to attach it to the house, and then that requirement goes away. You can just hit up to 1,200. So oftentimes we're attaching our ADUs because the main house is too small. So there's kind of a weird loophole you can do. So that needs to be cleaned up a little bit in our rules because people are just attaching them now and avoiding the 50% rule. If you're converting a basement, I saw in the previous slides, 850 square feet was the max size. We have unlimited basement if it's an existing basement. So if let's say you have like a big sprawling ranch house, and we have those here that are 1,500 square foot basements, the whole basement can be the apartment. I think people didn't want you to have half their basement apartment and then the other half not. So you could choose to do that, but there's no requirement for that. They want to take out the stairs in between and just have like a nice separate apartment with no connection. So we do allow unlimited size for an existing basement. It has to have a separate entrance from outside. You can't go into the main house and then into the ADU. So you have to build an exterior door from the basement or from the addition. And then it has to be fire rated wherever it's connected. So the floor between the basement and the first floor, and that's really simple to do. It's really just thicker drywall, and we put some sound insulation in there just to help out with noise and things like that. And then the HVAC is separate because air ducts bring in oxygen, which allows fire to go through, right? So we cut off all the duct work. So you have two separate HVAC systems. So you have no possibility for fire spreading. And these are some issues I have with our rules. We're almost done. We're just going to go over the issues and then we'll be done. Number one, the ADU setbacks differ from a basic accessory structure like a garage or shed. So if you build a shed or a garage in Montgomery County, it's 5 foot. It's a 5 foot setback from the rear of the side. An ADU is 12 from the back, so it's 7 feet more, and then it matches the house, which is 8. So if you built a garage for yourself or you have an existing garage, most of those are either like 5 feet from the line or they're up against the fence because they've been there forever. It's hard to convert those to an ADU. So we have a couple of laws that we do. You can always get a variance, number one, and they usually allow it as long as you're not increasing that footprint or going closer to the property line. But they have another rule where as long as you're not making the garage any bigger, you're just keeping that footprint exactly, it doesn't matter where the existing garage is. They'll let you turn it into an ADU. So, but this causes a lot of confusion because a lot of people build brand new garages for themselves. And they do it 5 feet from the line, and then they're like, let's turn it into an ADU. And then they got to go through a variance process or something to do that. So I would prefer it was just the same. Causes no confusion. There's no difference from an ADU being 5 feet from a property line versus 8. I just don't see why you want this building in the middle of your yard. It should be sort of on the side of the yard so you can enjoy the yard a little bit more, especially 12 feet from the back. Like that's a lot of square footage you're eating up in your backyard. And a lot of these backyards aren't very big. So having to move this building 7 feet closer to your house just seems like it's just a waste of land. So anyway, those are some issues that we have. I wish our setbacks were a little bit more normal. We talked about the 50% rule, right? I don't have to go into this one again, but I think the fix should be we should allow a guaranteed minimum size. So if you do have a small, tiny house and you want to build an ADU, you shouldn't get punished for having that tiny house. Like we're rewarding McMansions because they have giant footprints. So you can build a huge ADU, but someone who's sort of like environmentally responsible, the small house kind of gets punished for having an ADU because their size is too small. So anyway, I recommend a guaranteed minimum size. California, I believe, does this. I think you're guaranteed you can build 600 square feet, and not everywhere in California, but certain areas of California have these rules. I think that's really helpful. Parking requirements, always the big one. So if you're within a mile of a metro station, you get a waiver. You don't have to provide any additional parking for your ADU. They figure someone can walk or take the bus. Um, parking's already kind of tight on those places, so within a mile of metro. So they don't try to like make you carve in a bigger driveway or anything. However, if you're not within a mile of the metro, Montgomery County does this thing that's very expensive. If you don't already have a driveway, which a lot of places don't have driveways, um, or at least a big enough driveway, you basically have to build a 3-car driveway if you want to add an ADU on your property. Because zoning says the accessory structure is equal to 1 space and the main house is equal to 2. And you can't just build 1 or 2, you have to build 3. So we've had clients who are like, I have to spend 20 grand on a driveway just to build my ADU so they can have 3 off-street parking spaces. So some of these things, are an issue. And then the other one, high construction costs. I'm sure a lot of you saw that 300K number and were blown away by that. And we get that all the time, but that's what it really costs. Here in Montgomery County with the fire sprinkler issue, that costs a lot of money, especially if you increase your main plumbing from the street because you don't have enough pressure. Even if the main house is not required to have fire sprinklers, the ADU is required to have them here in Montgomery County. So I really got excited when I saw in the last slides that that sprinkler requirement might go away. Hopefully it doesn't exist if the main house doesn't need fire sprinklers. Um, what's even more ironic is a basement apartment or an attached ADU doesn't require fire sprinklers, which makes no sense, right? That's more unsafe to be connected than separate. So Montgomery County does things a little bit different. Our energy code is really high. I know that's just a code issue. It does increase cost though. We have to build an ADU like a real house. We have to meet the highest R values of insulation in the walls. Our HVAC systems are just like a house. It's not like you're building a shed with lesser things. You are putting the same exact windows, the same exact materials as your main house. It's just a mini version of it. So that's why a lot of these things cost a lot of money. Look at adding just the cost of an addition on a house. If you want to add a 400 square foot, 500 square foot addition on a house, it's costing roughly that same number. So I think a lot of people think these things cost like $50,000 to build because they see online they can order an ADU on Amazon and it's like $35,000. Those don't even work here in Montgomery County. They don't allow it. They just don't meet our codes. So and it can't be a mobile home. It has to have in-ground plumbing. It can't move around. You can't drive somewhere and park it like an RV. So I hear the law might be addressing that, the new state law. I don't know yet, but I'll look into that. And then we have drainage stormwater management. No matter what, an ADU is required to do a drainage plan and provide a stormwater management well to collect rainwater, no matter how big it is. So you can build 1,000 square feet on your house and may not have to do that requirement. But if you build a 300 square foot ADU, you have to do it. And that's another thing that doesn't make sense to me. So a lot of people choose to attach it to the house to avoid that requirement. So we just have a lot of laws that people can kind of loophole around. And, I think you guys should be aware in Prince George's County, like how, look at both options and see, how people can bend that law to get around. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer questions. And you can also email me if you have more questions after the presentation or next week, whatever. Glad to answer them. So thank you all for letting me present, and feel free to shoot some questions my way.
Thank you very much. Right, just want to just glancing back through the questions we'd gotten and see what else what hasn't already been covered on there. So there was a meta question that, why is it taking Prince George's so long to move on to get ADUs going? Anybody got any insight?
And Aurelis would be a great, might have some more insight here. Robert, if she's still here.
I'm still here. Why is Prince George's County taking so long?
Yep.
The county itself?
Yep.
You have too many politicians in the game of ADUs, and one of the biggest issues that we have has to do with DeFi and the permitting of the ADUs in the county, the zoning as well. But we'll see. I'm keeping optimistic.
All right.
I have a comment on that, Carter, which when we were looking at ADUs back in the 2019s for the age-friendly plan, someone said that the reason why the county did not have rules for this and blocked ADUs was because they were afraid that there would be too many, badly constructed sheds basically that were created as ADUs, and so they just totally blocked the whole thing. And I don't know whether that was true or not, or just what they were talking about in terms of the concerns from at that time.
There are two overlapping questions that are kind of similar. Is there any possibility for an ADU resident to purchase either the structure or the structure and land, or must they continue to be owned by the primary residence owner? And there was a similar question about having a double lot. If the ADU is on one lot and the house is on the other, could you sell the house lot, but what would continue to happen to the land the ADU is on?
We had that issue come up on a project. It's not an ADU if it's on a separate lot. It's just the main house. So you can't technically build an ADU on someone else on a second lot. You could build it on your lot, then divide the property, and then it becomes a separate lot. But you'd have to meet all the zoning for each of those lots. Like, for example, we have a 6,000 minimum square foot requirement for a lot. So you'd have to own a 12,000 square foot parcel that when you cut in half, you create two 6,000 square foot minimum lots. So, and then they'd have to be done in a way where, they're equal in terms of like you have access to the road in the same way. So it's a little complicated to do that. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answers all of the question, but it does make it hard. And then selling a lot to a friend, I guess you could be co-owners of the same lot, but subdividing the lot is just hard to do. Yeah.
There was a question about what does connected mean when talking about an ADU having to be connected to the house. Does it mean a shared wall, or would a breezeway count as connected?
It has to be a conditioned space. It can't be like a deck or an open porch. If you're going to make something attached, it has to be finished space. So you can have a wall and a door dividing it, that's fine. But you can't go, like, for example, inside to outside, back to inside. It has to be all interior space connecting.
Okay.
Is there anything that prevents the ADUs from becoming Airbnbs? I think there was a question like that in the.
Yeah, it would just be a law, right? No short-term rentals. It's more of the enforcement of that that's hardest to do, because you could rent a bedroom out of your house. There's nothing against that. So it's hard to, at least here in Montgomery County. So it's hard to know if, like, are you renting an ADU or are you just renting a guest suite in your home? Like, so it's very confusing. So it's really the enforcement and how that law is written. But right now in Montgomery County, it's just hard to know because you could just say, "Oh yeah, I'm just renting a bedroom of my home," which that's legal. Whether you can rent the ADU that way, someone would have to catch you and turn you in and all that. So, but I think we do have some anti short-term rental rules with ADUs. It's written, but if anybody's following them, I don't know.
And what about in Prince George's, Robert and Davina? What's the conversation like on that? I mean, if it was a detached ADU, what keeps it from being rented as a Airbnb?
There is discussion about that, and I would go back to even the state says that, they do not see short-term rentals as a long-term solution for our housing crisis. So
Mhm.
they caution that as a possibility, but they don't eliminate it because they also raise the issue of does that does that subsidized income allow the single family owner to stay in their home? Um, but I would that is, as Eric has said, and also I think the first question we had about Prince George's County, I believe that the biggest concern and fear in ADUs is the policing or managing of the process. And for whatever reason, ADUs seem to hearken that every housing exception and issue that we have will somehow reside in an ADU.
Mhm.
Uh, Not so much a question, but a comment. It was mentioned that if ADUs are going to be promoted as a solution for affordable senior housing, it seems that constructing one level units would make more sense than two-level structures.
Agreed. And that's something that that would be up to the individual um, owner that's creating the ADU. As Eric showed, that was something that someone had the forethought, even though the person that's moving into it right now might not need it, but they seem to have created the unit to accommodate that. And there is also some discussion about being able to, as I said before, create abatements and subsidies for those developers or those that are creating ADUs specifically for affordable housing and aging in place.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back to, I probably showed some pictures of two-story units for elderly or age in place. What we've done with those is everything you need is on the first floor. The second floor is simply like a loft area. A lot of people have grandkids or kids who want to stay with them for the weekend or just a friend. The loft is like a second bedroom area. So they can, the laundry, the bathroom, everything they need is on the lower level. They don't even have to go upstairs. The upstairs is just bonus space because we have a height limit that allows us to get a loft up there. It's almost free to build that space. So we just take advantage of it and build it out. And it's great we have to remember that people have guests that live in their homes or that stay with them for the weekend or whatever. So um, trying to get extra space or even more storage is always helpful.
Um, let's see, were there any other questions that I missed in going back over the chat? If anybody wants to unmute
I
and ask
think,
it directly.
yeah, I think Danny Scheibel had a question as to whether Prince George's or other local zoning areas, jurisdictions were considering waivers or grandfathering the basement ceiling heights as they relate to ADU build outs. Maybe he wants to say, I think he's on here, back on here. This has to do with, I guess, the headroom for that you discussed, Eric, I think.
Yeah, the 6'8" head height. Um,
Mhm.
it's in the existing International Building Code. I might have that backwards. It might be International Existing Building. IEBC is what it's called. and they allow for a 6'8" ceiling, and that's what we use in Montgomery County, but it should be the same all around this area. So 6'8" has been the standard. And they allow things like beams, ductwork, things like that to drop to 6'4". So you have
Mm.
4" for like ducking under a beam, things like that. But anything lower than 6'8", it's a little short. It's tough to do. So we have to dig down the basement, and there's ways to do that. We can dig down another foot or two if we need to. We've done that before.
There was a question, does every municipality have to have ADU rules? For example, the county plus every city and town? Or is it like other zoning things where the county is the one that's in charge of it? That's, I guess, more of a Prince George's oriented question.
It appears that the county is creating legislation that will be applicable to all counties and municipalities. But I think that piece of it is going to fall to the committee that I really didn't speak that much about, which is community and public outreach. There is the expectation that they will take the show on the road once they have base information and expected standards. And I would anticipate that that would be the time where they will allow for any type of differences per location. But I do believe that many municipalities, I know the city of College Park has submitted a letter to the task force to um, uh, encourage or ask for certain things themselves.
And I just put a link into the chat again to the county's ADU task force's webpage. So people can look there for additional information.
And you don't have to be a municipality to submit your questions and thoughts on it. So please use it.
Lynn Carey asks, the Maryland General Assembly considered but did not enact legislation in the 2026 session, which would have severely limited the ability of local governments to put in place zoning requirements that would have restricted ADUs, including setback requirements, minimum lot size, etc. What are your thoughts on that effort?
Could you repeat that last part? Like they would restrict or they wouldn't restrict?
Which would have restricted, so would have limited the ability of local governments to put in place zoning requirements that would restrict ADUs.
I guess I'm in favor of, well, me personally, and I don't want to. If you have laws where every jurisdiction needs to create their own setbacks, it gets really complicated to design one. We need to standardize these because it's very confusing to have, one neighborhood could say ours are 5 feet away from the fence, and then one neighborhood may not want them. So they create setbacks that are unfavorable to build them and say, well, we have a 12-foot setback. Well, what if you have a skinny yard, right? Now it's like you could be locked out of not being able to build one. So we saw that here in Montgomery County. They changed the setbacks a little bit, and they were trying to make them so big they'd almost cancel out in certain neighborhoods. So I personally think a more standardized version across the county works a little bit better. It creates less confusion, and you can, I don't know, nobody wants to be confused when they read a bill. And if every different jurisdiction has a different setback, it gets really complicated.
Thank you.
It looks like I don't see any additional questions. Do you, Carter?
I don't. I believe we got through them all.
Yeah. Does anybody who is still on want to raise their hands or ask questions? Because if not, we can let our speakers go. The College Park affordability report is listed in the chat, so you can download that.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. It's my first time being in this community, so thank you. I'm very excited to support in any way I can. Thank you, Robert, for bringing me in.
Great. It looks like there are a lot of thank yous in the comments too. So thank you very much to each of the speakers.
Yes, and
Thank you for having
all
us.
thank you for letting me speak. And again, I'll be a resource to all of you. So I put my information up there. You can reach out to me whenever. Happy to do this.
And I think that we are including your slides in the YouTube and on our website. So if that's okay with you, that'll be available to everybody.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good rest of the afternoon.